and welcome to another episode of Not Too Deep. I'm your host, Grace Helbig. I am so excited to have the Hollywood medium, celebrity clairvoyant, Tyler Henry on today's episode. Oh, he is such a sweetheart. I can't say enough good things about him. We talk about how he has cultivated his intuition, how he's turned it into this kind of remarkable and ever-growing career, the skeptics of mysticism. His pants-shitting story is absolutely mystically, magically wonderful. And the reason and the funny story behind how we had a misconnection when we first started to record this episode. So please enjoy Tyler Henry on this episode of Not Too Deep.
Not too deep. Not too deep. With Grace Helbig.
Tyler, I'm so excited that you're here.
Well, I'm so excited to be here. I had such a blast last time, and I'm excited.
Yeah, we got to talk briefly on our This Might Get web series. And so I'm really excited to just kind of like dive deeper with you here on Not Too Deep. You were saying before we started, you have a funny story for me.
I do. So this was originally supposed to happen about a week ago.
Yeah.
And I was excited for it. My assistant had told me that it was on Thursday, and it was in actuality, I think it was either on Friday. I got the dates mixed up.
No
and
worries.
So I was really excited. I was in the middle of Mojave Desert on vacation the day before I was supposed to do this.
Yeah.
And being a medium, what I do is very polarizing. So I get text messages from kind of random numbers, usually from churches or organizations that are like, get an idea of what I do. And so I'll get like, God's glory is great. Click this link. Or, sometimes the other day I got one that said like, repent now, Tyler. And so they'll send like a link to their church. So I'm in the middle of the Mojave Desert enjoying my vacation, and I get a text message that just says, Grace is waiting for you. And I thought, well, so is God's glory. I showed my boyfriend. I'm like, they're not even sending links to their churches anymore. This is ridiculous. And then I got a call from my publicist, and I was like, oh my God, I did not see that coming. Good job, psychic. Like, whoops. So yeah, thank you for your patience.
Amazing. And also, I mean, it's like a beautiful and also like very threatening text.
Just Grace is waiting for you. Unsaved number. I was like, oh wow, they're getting ballsy.
I love it. But you're here now. How was your vacation?
Oh, it was good. I was able to unwind. I've been able to work virtually, which has been great. So I'm sure you can relate. It's a whole new world now, but
yeah,
kind of acclimated.
Now, when you go on vacation, because I feel like you're obviously a person that could work every minute of the day and probably kind of does in your own way. Do you really try to unplug? Do you really try to like, do some things that are good for the soul?
Totally. When I have time off, I definitely don't go clubbing or anything like that. I really try to go to places that are kind of in the middle of nowhere, like the Mojave Desert, or, being in nature is nice. But yeah, I think for anybody, it's just important to recharge, especially when what you do, revolves around energy and exchange. I think anyone in a public, field or anything where you're having an interaction, I think you definitely have to conserve your energy.
Yeah. Now, okay, for people that don't understand, let's just go really basic on how do you describe like what you do as a medium, as a clairvoyant, these terms that people kind of throw around without, I don't think, fully understanding what they are, probably the reason that you get so many threatening texts. So how do you describe what you do?
Well, as a medium, I really just, in the most simplest form, describe it as being a conduit for information. And that conduit is really something of an ability in the sense that clairvoyance is the way that I receive information. So I get very strong mental images. Clairvoyance is a French word that means clear sight. So generally, people who are clairvoyant have very strong dreams, mental images. Sometimes it's just like a waking daydream. But that's kind of my primary way that I receive information. Be it about living people who've passed. And it's just fundamentally an intuitive process of which I think everybody has the capability to connect to on some level.
Yeah.
I don't think everybody, is maybe set to do readings, but everybody can get a first impression. You shake someone's hand for the first time, you get a vibe. And I think people discount that. So I think we all have the ability to connect to that deeper inner tuition.
Wow. And so I agree with that. And I think people, like you said, everyone has some level of ability to connect into that. Others deeper than others, I'm sure. Now, when did this start showing up for you? When you were a little boy?
Well, it was the weirdest thing because I grew up in a household that really didn't talk about this kind of thing. We weren't into spirits or ghosts or whatever. And,
Yeah.
a pretty Presbyterian, conservative family.
Mm,
But my grandmother was my best friend, and I grew up as an only child and still am.
yeah.
And she was just my everything. And at 10 years old, I woke up one night and had a knowingness that my grandmother was going to die.
Yeah.
And at the time, it wasn't really anything, visual. I just had this knowingness that she was going to pass, and I didn't know how to explain it. So I went to the room. I was upset, trying to explain this feeling to my mom. And as I was sharing it with her, her phone rang, and she said, "Okay, hold on." And she picked up her phone, and it was my dad on the other end giving my mom the news that my grandmother had just died.
Wow.
So that was really the catalyst. But at 10 years old, you don't recognize that as an ability as much as it's just something that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And it took time of these kind of moments of knowingness to occur to kind of identify it as something I could do.
And so when was it like a decision that you made to start cultivating this and paying more attention to it? Or was it just that I can't ignore this? This is happening. And even if I try to push it away, it's still there. And if you did make a decision, how did you start going deeper with that?
Well, from the ages of 10 to 13, it was really just exploring these kind of random things. I would get impressions, I call them impressions at school around, other students and what was going on sometimes at home in their personal lives. And then that started translating to getting feelings about teachers. And then I started sharing these feelings with teachers, which as a kid was very risky growing up in a very conservative town. So I had these extremely close bonds with these people in the sense that they weren't skeptical because what I said had relevance.
Yeah.
But, it really was an explorative process. And then I graduated high school when I was 16 years old to try to become a hospice nurse because high school was very difficult. What I do is very polarizing, in part, I think, because it is ideological, kind of like politics, in the sense that anything ideological, you're going to get opposition. So I had to navigate that.
And anything that anyone is passionate about in high school at that age, I feel like people are so ready to discount or disprove in some way, let alone it being something extremely spiritual in that sense, where kids are still trying to figure out what their personalities are. And you're talking in a different realm than where everyone's at right now. So you wanted to be a hospice nurse, and then you started paying more attention to this. How did we go from that to then you're on a TV show doing all of this?
So word of mouth spread really quickly. And I always believed, when it comes to mediums, psychics, you shouldn't have to advertise extensively. If you're real, if you really are able to bring through valuable information, people will tell their friends, they'll tell your family, tell their family. So word of mouth spread very quickly. And by the time I was 17, I had people coming to my front door, leaving notes. And it just kind of was more than I was expecting in all honesty. So I naturally just kind of started reading more people. I was charging, I think, $30 for a reading to try to pay for textbooks and going to college. Not a lot of money, but it was just an inundation of requests. And then I started getting driven to Southern California, where I started doing readings. And then naturally, you meet people in the industry. One thing led to another. But when it comes to the television show, I really had to prove myself. The executives at the time received readings, but then they had me read people that they picked that there's no way I could have known. So friends, family, and I kind of was put through the ringer to make sure that I could really do what I could do. And being, at the time, I think it was like 19, it was really nerve-wracking to be put to the test in a big way. But I'm thankful in hindsight because it was a precursor to what I would face, doing my job every day. I, on some level, have to prove myself in every reading. Yeah.
What's the difference for you when you're doing it publicly and with cameras on versus, a private reading with someone? I mean, do you feel a difference, or is it not really?
So the process is the exact same, but how I go about it can vary. So I liken my ability to that of like a mailman, in the sense that I'm not writing the letters, I'm just kind of delivering the message. So I have a responsibility when I am in a public platform to articulate what I'm getting in a way that's honest to what I'm getting, but also considerate of that person's feelings and maybe people who aren't in the room. Particularly with celebrities, we dealt with that because they live such public lives. They sometimes have a lot that they don't want public. So I've kind of had to learn how to say things diplomatically, get the message across. And I would just say readings on camera for public figures are probably the hardest. I much prefer just reading everyday people. They generally have less baggage. And they usually are just more straightforward with validating whether something makes sense or doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, you really had to cultivate your, I guess, reading etiquette in that sense. And I'm curious too, if there is, or if you recommend like people that are getting read for the first time or curious about being read, like, is there an etiquette for the person being read? And if so, what?
Totally. I would say number one, if you're interested in seeing a medium, do it through recommendation. So go or find somebody that has seen a medium and had a good experience and go to that person versus, going to a palm reader with a neon sign, in a walk-in situation. Unfortunately, the world of mediums and psychics is not regulated. It's not like, contracting where you can get a license and you pass a test. So unfortunately, anybody can claim to be a medium. And that's why I put so much emphasis on the validation, on the readings. I think you can honestly get a sense of someone's legitimacy on an intuitive level. If someone's presenting themselves as an angel card reader and they were certified by another medium, or they went to some fancy schmazzy medium school, those are red flags for me. I think going through recommendation is most important. And in the same way that you wouldn't really just call up a random 1-800 number to get a consultation on your health, like with a doctor, you kind of want to make sure you're going to someone that comes with a high regard.
Interesting. Yeah, that obviously makes total sense. Are there mediums that work in the space that you admire or that you've kind of tracked and or like mentors that you have?
Well, growing up, I didn't have any mentors really. And that's kind of what was so, I think, difficult in my life of kind of having to learn on my own the hard way. But there are a number of mediums that I do admire. And I think we all work very differently. But John Edward, is one of the first. He kind of paved the way in a big way. But everyone's process is so different. I think people assume mediums get along, really closely and that we all can kind of relate. But I've learned everyone's process and way of doing things is so different. It's actually hard sometimes to find the commonalities.
Interesting. And have you found that your process has changed or evolved over the years that you've been doing this for so long?
I would say it's gotten clearer. I feel like my ability's been more refined, but that's only came with confidence. I think nerves are a big hindrance to intuition and doubt. I mean, really, we second guess ourselves very often. And it's why we kick ourselves when we don't go with our intuitive hunch. And then we find out in hindsight that would have been a good idea. It's definitely, I think with experience comes a certain stability and a certain strength in yourself, even separate from psychics, just as human beings. Time shows us that we can get through things that we thought we weren't able to get through. And when we can, I feel like that adds to our character and just, you feel more grounded in who you are. Yeah.
It's so interesting, especially, I know one of the kind of like tropes of your show was that you didn't know a lot of these, big celebrities that you were going in to read. Is there a celebrity or a person of note that that you would like to read? Like, do you have a wish list of people that you'd like to have conversations with?
Yeah, it's funny. In the beginning, in season 1 especially, I came from this little town in the middle of nowhere. I didn't know pop culture. And then as I, had a TV show, I did become more familiar with more celebrities and whatnot. But I found that in doing it, whether someone was an A-lister or a D-lister, it really didn't matter. I loved when people were kind. And I feel like you could feel that kindness. And that to me was what mattered the most when I would leave an interaction as far as my excitement about that person. But that said, I find just really interesting people. Everybody's interesting to me, but like Tanya Harding would be a really fascinating reading.
That's
former Olympian.
Yeah. Oh, that would be great.
People who have a lot going on who might benefit from some sense of resolve. I feel like that's where my ability shines. And I think she's somebody who has dealt with a lot of scrutiny and has experienced a lot of loss. And it would just be interesting to meet her.
Wow, what an interesting answer. I would never have guessed that for you, but I would love to watch that segment.
For sure.
Let's talk about what you do in your free time, because I've noticed on your Instagram, you're into stained glass lately.
Yes, yes, yes.
How did this happen?
The quarantine got me desperate for hobbies. I was just staring at my walls. I was like, what am I going to do? Then I looked at my window and I'm like, oh, that could use some little bit of a zhuzh.
Yeah.
So I started making stained glass, and it's just been a really fun hobby. Anybody can do it. I think
Really?
anybody who's interested, it's not that hard. It's very simple. It just costs about probably $400 you have to spend just to start on the hobby. But once you do that, like, you're smooth sailing. So I encourage anybody to do it. It's a really like tactile hobby. It's gratifying because you can see it, at the end and hold it.
Yeah. I mean, it's such an interestingly specific hobby that I didn't realize that just anyone could pick up. I've also seen that like your dad helps you with it. You and your dad seem like you have a really cute relationship.
Yes, we were so close. Growing up, my parents were more conservative, and on many fronts, I had to really kind of just be true to who I was with them, being gay, being a medium, and with that kind of came a lot of coming outs. So in time, I think there's a Maya Angelou quote: "When we know better, we do better." And my parents really embodied that. That when they were working with more information, they adjusted and they put their love for me before their love of their ideology, which I think was really a testament to how good of parents they are. So we're very close.
Really beautiful stuff, because could easily go in a different direction.
Absolutely, yes. And for a while I thought it would, but I got really lucky.
That's beautiful. Okay, I'm curious now because you've written a memoir, and now you have another book coming out, correct?
Yes.
What is it like to like shift focus and like sit and write a book?
Well, with the pandemic, I did have a lot of time to do that. And I was actually recovering from a lung collapse shortly before the pandemic broke out. So I was in bed for like months and months and months, had a bunch of complications. But I was able to write the book in that time. So I had a lot of free time to just kind of look at the ceiling and think about, life thus far.
Yeah.
And it really, the second book, which will be coming out early next year, was really just a culmination of kind of what I've learned in the past few years. I think I wrote a memoir when I was 19. I feel like at 19, how much of a memoir can you really write? I mean, you're still a child.
Right.
So, I like to share new things that I've learned, update, people with, and also give, tidbits that you don't see on the show, and kind of celebrity anecdotes, which keeps it interesting as well.
Fun. Do you journal? Do you take notes after readings? Do you kind of compile all of those experiences?
Sometimes ones that are particularly profound, I'll take note of and just, kind of jot down the significance to write about later. But yeah, it's one of those things where, after reading, I also kind of have to often shake it off. And a big part of shaking it off is sometimes not revisiting it. And that's been one of the interesting things in writing the book. I was so surprised by how many emotions came to the surface.
Oh,
and equally, when I watch my readings, I actually have a very hard time watching them on TV because I get emotional. I get emotional when I'm watching it in a way that I do not when I'm actually doing my job. Yeah. So it's interesting.
You're almost like an athlete that like when you're in the game, you're so focused. And then when you go back and watch your old tapes, you're like, wow, that was intense. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, I got to know about Nancy, of course. So we'll be right back with more Not Too Deep.
Not Too Deep with Grace Helbig.
Hi, friends. Grace Helbig here from the podcast Not Too Deep, which you are currently listening to, hosted by me, Grace Helbig. Just wanted to say a couple of things. One, thank you so much for listening. And two, if you are enjoying yourself to such a degree that you'd love to leave us a review on the Apple Store, that would be so appreciated, because again, you are very appreciated for giving us your time, your ears, your attention, whatever it may be. And that was my couple of things. Now back to me. Okay, let's talk about Nancy. How did this beautiful creature end up in your life?
Oh, she is a dog wonder, and she's actually going to be on my new series coming out. So she's definitely a star now. But we got her about a year ago, and it was actually, unfortunately, my previous dog had passed kind of in an untimely way. So we got her kind of in the midst of grief, and I think animals just provide such an unconditional love. For me, it's the best thing that I could have done in that moment. And I think the love you get from animals, it transcends even the love you sometimes get from humans, and I think it's very special.
1,000%. Now, did you get a vibe from Nancy when you were in search of a creature to bring into your home?
She just came into our life. We actually had a friend who gave her to us. So it was like my previous dog had passed, and then the next day it was just this gift. So, they say divine timing. I think it works out. So
that's wonderful. And will she be going on tour with you?
I wish we need more puppy pads to really pull off that feat. But you know what? Maybe season, give her a couple of years, get potty trained. We'll see.
Well, let's talk about tour. So you're about to go back out on tour.
Yeah.
How do you conceptualize your tour? What goes into that?
Yeah, well, it's really a two-part show. The first, I really just explain how I do what I do to give people an understanding of the process and some of the most meaningful kind of lessons behind it.
Yeah.
And then it's a live audience, reading. So I go out and I read. Oftentimes there's 3,000 to 5,000 people present, and I'll try to do as many readings as I can in that time.
Wow.
And I never know what's going to happen. It's really the most nerve-wracking thing in the world, because I just go out and I have to trust that something's going to come through and it's going to make sense. So it's very emotional. And I think even if someone doesn't receive a reading, they can see the readings that do happen, and I believe get a sense of comfort or understanding. And that's really what the show's all about. I feel like the audience kind of goes on the journey together through these one-on-one readings.
Do you do any rituals or anything afterwards to just recharge your batteries? Because I can imagine it's very draining to do that in front of thousands of people.
Particularly when it's day after day after day. Sometimes we'll have multiple days booked in a week, and you have to get on a plane and fly. So I really kind of got a better understanding of rock stars who have a hard time going to sleep and then having to wake up and go back on tour. It can be really overwhelming, but I actually physical to shake it off. I do exercise after, usually jumping jacks, just anything to kind of try to recenter and refocus, I think is important.
Yeah. Well, you also said that you're in a relationship.
Yes.
I can imagine that it must be, different to get into a relationship and explain to someone what you do and how you do it. How did you guys meet, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah. So in season 1, he actually had seen the show and he tweeted me. We live in very modern times, right? It's not like the most romantic thing in the world, but it slid into those DMs and the rest is history. But he actually had gone through a significant loss. His grandfather had passed from suicide a couple shortly before we had connected, and I was able to communicate to his family why he ended his life, and it was validated by those who knew him. It was a very private thing, and I think it just gave a lot of closure and comfort to them to get that further validation. But as a result of that, he and I had an immediate bond because he had just gone through this loss, and we connected in a really profound way. And now it's been 5 years. We live together immediately.
Wow!
And you know us gays. It's like rapid fire, honey. We're speeding this up.
Plans.
Exactly. Yes, but it's been great. So I'm very lucky.
That's incredible. Is there ever a worry from him that you're reading him, or do you guys have house rules, ground rules of everything?
I definitely do read him, and it happens randomly, and sometimes the most random things will come through, and he'll oftentimes have to make a phone call and ask his mom, call her in Georgia, and she's like, oh yeah, that happens. So it's really just more bizarre than anything. And I think one benefit of being very intuitive is you do kind of get a sense of the essence of a person and whether you're compatible. And that I think in my own life has been the greatest thing that I've gotten from my ability, is really that discernment of who I'm going to resonate with and who might be best to avoid. And that's been a gift for me. Yeah,
that's an invaluable asset. I also saw on your Instagram that you were reading the Red Book, a C.G. Jung book, and I'm studying a little bit about it now. Are you just getting into this? Have you been into depth psychology and all of that for a second?
I'm such a newbie, but I find
me too.
And it's so cerebral and so beyond my pay grade. I always tell people that man was working on a whole other level. But his belief in archetypes, I really resonate. Yep. The idea that there's patterns on multiple levels, within us, within others. His connection to mythology and the belief that mythology kind of connects to modern day, and that you can look to myths to see how our lives often go and play out. Yeah. So I definitely resonate with those aspects. Are there consistent signs or symbols that you stumble upon more than others, if you're just out and about or if you're doing readings? So one of the interesting things in meeting with thousands of people is I've kind of learned what they recognize as signs. And I've learned that it's kind of interesting how many commonalities people's connections to these signs are. And very often, and it was confusing initially, people, connect with birds, butterflies, dragonflies,
Butterflies are
ladybugs,
massive.
anything flying around. For some reason, people have a genuine spiritual connection with and often view it as a sign. And I really think the reason is this, that these things really just are symbolic. They represent transcending, being above it all, much like a bird. If you even look in biblical texts of angels being depicted with wings in art, more than the actual biblical text, that was to really symbolize them being in an ascended state, kind of above us, watching over us, looking down upon us. So I think why people might connect with doves, butterflies, dragonflies, all of that is because it is, in essence, just symbolic. It's an archetype almost in and of itself.
Totally. Do you have a specific animal or symbol that you connect with?
Oh my gosh, they change constantly. So
I'm sure.
I usually just kind of take a sign for what it is. And I haven't had too many repeating ones. Some people see numbers frequently and attribute that to a sign. I don't so much. I don't quite have that. But who knows?
Yeah. Okay. Well, because I'm also a newbie in that whole world and I could talk to you for a long time about all of that. But I'm going to kind of shift the mood a little bit and ask you the two questions I ask every single guest that is on the podcast. And the first is, and I'm really interested to hear your answer, who, alive or dead, would you most like to throw cold spaghetti at? I feel like
spaghetti at.
And it can be any intention of toss that you'd like.
That is funny. Maybe Ayn Rand.
Oh, okay.
That's my final answer.
I don't think we've ever gotten that answer.
Everyone's going to Google, be like, who's Ayn Rand?
Yeah, exactly. How do I spell it?
Right.
I love that. Any particular reason?
We just don't. We were just on very different pages in life. And
so bring you together in some capacity.
Yeah.
Okay. The other question I ask every single guest is to tell us your worst pants shitting story or like a bathroom emergency.
Yeah.
However, you can only use 3 words or small phrases to describe the event. So, for example, mine is college jogging front lawn.
Oh, wow. Okay. Mine would be.
Oh, enema, you have one immediately.
Enema with mom.
Oh, no.
That's all I'm going to say.
Wow. Your parents have really been there through all of it.
Through the thick and the thin of it, let me tell you.
Yikes. No follow-up questions there. Wonderful. Okay, now we do this section called Deep and Hot, where I'm going to ask you a deep question, and then I'm going to ask you for a hot take on something. Okay. So the first deep question, the only deep question I have for you, is when COVID was at its peak in 2020, was it overwhelming for you as a clairvoyant to sense illness and death?
I would say just from a human level, even separate from being psychic, the amount of collective stress and pressure there was so overwhelming. And I think anybody who's just more empathetic, I think really dealt with a lot of issues, especially being alone and seeing the state of the world. So I would say my ability certainly didn't make things more comforting for me. But at the same time, I think we're all on the same boat here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay. Now I would love your hot take on, and you've kind of touched on this a little bit, on the people that are kind of, completely closed-minded to any sort of spiritual or mystical realm.
Yeah. Oh, I would just say, as far as that goes, everyone has different ideologies. Some people kind of are convinced from the get-go that we're spiritual beings living a physical existence. And other people, you couldn't convince them no matter what. I think with the nature of what I do, there's often conversations around skepticism. Yeah. I think critical thinking is so important. I value it to an extreme extent. I think that's how you learn new things. Yeah. And so I encourage people to think critically. But when it comes to, cynicism, it starts being difficult. I think with skeptics, you have all kinds of skeptics, and skepticism doesn't necessarily equate to intelligence. We have vaccine skeptics, we have climate change skeptics, we have people who are skeptical that the world is spherical. So it's just, I think seeing the nuance of things, that things are not black or white, at least puts us in a place of being open to seeing where the evidence leads. Yeah.
That's such a beautifully put and respectful answer on all of that. I'm curious, Do you watch TV or movies? And if so, what are you watching? What are you taking in for entertainment?
So just the most mindless stuff possible. I love Below Deck.
Yeah.
Below Deck. I'm
Yes.
like Mediterranean. Love me some Captain Sandy.
Oh,
We've got Gypsy Sisters, which I probably would not air in this day and age in 2021. But you know what? It was certainly a chapter in TLC history.
yes. I was going to say, was that from the Learning Channel?
And the Learning Channel, the prestigious Learning Channel, Gypsy Sisters, and then I think Extreme Gypsy Makeover. Well, there's something there. Anyway, that franchise, it's excellent.
Amazing. Oh, I'm also a big Captain Sandy fan. My claustrophobia would never let me work in that kind of situation, but I'm constantly fascinated by it.
Yes.
I've also seen you tweeting a lot lately about UFOs.
Yes.
And kind of tweeting in a flirty way with that. It's not just, extraterrestrials. There's possibly other ways to think about it. I'm curious, how do you think about it?
Yeah. Well, I think in the past year, we've made great strides in the subject of UFOs. For decades and decades, it's been considered a fringe topic. And then recently, with the release of the Pentagon videos, which there was multiple, the Nimitz incident was really compelling. It was taken on a ship, and it was very evident that there was, something anomalous that was being detected with military radar. So it wasn't just a person with a camera phone,
Right.
And I think through that, now we have a whole group of people dedicated to informing Congress about the subject. We've made great strides in it. But I think a lot of people, when they think UFO, they automatically assume little green men. I don't particularly resonate with that in the sense of I think it could just be so much more than that. There are theories around something called the interdimensional hypothesis versus the extraterrestrial hypothesis. And that theory states that these things could be from other dimensions and may actually not be from other worlds, but may be from our world, just kind of in a different way. So that's a theory I resonate with, but nobody knows. And I find it fascinating.
Oh, it's super. I've also heard all these theories that, the creators of the Marvel universe are kind of in on all of this, and that their content is priming all of us to actually be able to handle these concepts that would blow our brains and distort our religious realities in so many different ways, which is why I don't know exactly what I believe, but I'm fascinated by every angle of it. And the idea that Loki could be really priming us for that specific thing. I'm going, what an interesting way that we need to watch TV in this capacity and learn about it in these fantastical stories to start being able to digest it in our reality, whatever
We've
this is.
We've gone down the rabbit hole. We've gone deep, but it seems almost archetypal in and of itself.
Yeah, totally. Okay. Before my brain spirals into mashed potatoes again, I'm going to take one last break. And when we get back, we have some questions that need some advice that maybe you and I can work together on.
Fabulous.
So we'll be right back with more Not Too Deep.
Not too deep with Grace Helbig.
Okay, we're back, Tyler. And I have a question for you that I thought is relevant to what you do and the way that your brain works. So this person writes that they have never written to a podcast before, but they were recently confronted with the imminent mortality of their parents, specifically the father, who suddenly and unexpectedly is now in the hospital, waiting to undergo open heart surgery. They're an only child, and as a loss, feels overwhelming at the idea of losing a parent, found themselves feeling scared, sad, anxious, but also has a weird sense of, well, this will happen to everyone, get over it. Don't know what kind of advice I want from this. Maybe just writing this email was enough. So I'm sure this is a lot of what you process with people at your events and your readings. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, as an only child, I can really relate to that sentiment because I'm so close with my parents and I really don't have much extended family on both sides. So when they pass, I'm in effect going to be alone unless I'm able to be with a partner for a long time or maybe have children. So it is, just from an existential perspective, very difficult to contemplate the inevitability of death. I think that's natural. And I think, if anything, it's a reminder of, why we want to stay alive and keep going. And in my work as a medium, I've learned that because even though it is inevitable, I would say it's just all you can do in the present moment is just honor those who are with us. We don't know when we're going to lose our loved ones. We don't know if it's going to be in 30 years or tomorrow. And I think if anything, I've learned in my work that readings are not a cure for grief. Right. They're just a reminder that there is a continuation of life, but we are meant to grieve. We are meant to mourn. We are meant to go through those very difficult human experiences. And I think no spirituality ever is going to really fill that void. And that's okay. I think that's part of the spiritual process, is having to weigh mortality, come to terms with it, and grieve physical loss.
Yeah, I think I saw you post something about how we tend to assume that grief will shrink over time when really we as vessels should be growing around our grief.
Totally.
And I think that's just a really beautiful way to put it. That going back to the Marvel stuff, I don't know if you watched WandaVision, but one of the more profound lines is that what is grief if not love persevering? Yes. And it was, it hit me in such feels. It was so beautiful and just a much more gentle way to process very intense feelings.
Totally. And not to be too corny, but they do say that every tear you shed is a testament to the love. And that really is what it's all about. That's
beautiful. Now, another question for you. Have you ever thought about doing any other job?
No.
Is there ever anything in the back of your mind that's like, you know what? I'm going to go check out law for a second.
Day trading, maybe professional blackjack.
Yeah.
There's a number of things, maybe horse racing. It'd be very tricky, especially now because I've created such a thing around being a medium. I don't think I could probably do much kind of in an incognito way with a secondary job. But people ask me kind of in the same vein, like if I were to ever lose my ability, what would I do? And I think I would just spend my whole life sharing what I learned in the time that I did have my ability. So I feel we're kind of a package deal at this point.
And so is the book that's coming out next year, is it all finished or are you still in the process? Okay.
Yeah. So I was able to finish the audiobook and it's called Here and Hereafter and it's available for pre-order now, but it will be out early next year.
Were there any things that you had to cut? Did you have to be very discerning about what you included and what you didn't? Because I know it's very easy for people to become, obsessed with the potential behind the scenes drama of any of the famous readings that you've had. But I'm sure that you were like, I want to give profound advice at the same time and not just be like, Chloe farted in front of me.
I will tell you, I definitely had my first copy and then it got revised and re-revised and kind of softened. Because, I genuinely respect the people who I've met and have had the honor to read. But I've had a lot of variety of different personalities. And, it definitely has been a lot. I do tell a story about meeting Larry King for the first time, and he was using the restroom, and I walked in on Larry King using the restroom, actively, and he turned around and he screamed, and I screamed, and we just had a moment where we were making eye contact, like full birthday suit situation, and then we had to go right into our interview. And he was like, I thought you were psychic. Didn't you know I was in there? And I'm like, clearly not. And then it was very awkward. So I do tell that story, which I had to revise. But Larry King, it was very regal. It was, it was a whole thing.
That is, talk about an impression that you get from someone.
First impression. However, that burned in my mind forever.
I love that. Now, is the tour tickets are also available for anyone that's interested?
They are. My website, TylerHenryHollywoodMedium.com. It is a mouthful, but I do have tickets available there. I'm going to probably about 36 cities as of right now. So if you're interested, you can see them in a town near you.
Great. And people can expect that you, like you said, you talk about what you do and then you spend time with the audience doing as many readings.
Yeah. The goal really is to just share as many readings as possible. And I, in my last show, ran an hour over the time. They were like, Tyler, you need to end the show. You keep, we're going to shut the lights off. So I do as many as I can. And it's just, I get on a roll and it just happens. I'm very thankful.
Is there I'm assuming no, but is there a, genre of audience or like an age group that tends to show up more than others? Or is it just kind of across the board, anyone and everyone shows up?
So initially in doing it, it was just primarily middle-aged women. And then as time went on and then people started repeating, coming back to multiple shows, they started bringing their husbands. And now half the audience is male. So we get all age demos, a lot of elderly people, who are naturally asking questions about their mortality. But we've got a lot of young people too. So it's nice, and all different cultures and backgrounds. And I think it just speaks to the universality of the question of what happens when we die. So
yeah, I'm so interested to hear how it goes this year, especially after the year that everyone has been, processing in their own time. So I'm sure it's going to be very interesting, to say the least.
Yes, certainly.
Tyler, this has been so fun. We're reaching the end of this, but before you go, we like to give our guests a gift. We make personalized horoscopes for our guests, and I think Melissa's gonna put it for you in the chat if you'd like to read it out loud for all of us.
Absolutely. All right, let's see. Dear Capricorn. Oh, I'm a Capricorn. You've done your research.
We were just hoping the internet was right.
Barbara Walters over here. We got it. All right. Dear Capricorn, sea goat of the stars, the new moon from the 9th will encourage you to make bolder commitments to either your business or your love. Ooh, bolder. So basically, you're going to figure out if you're going to get literally married or if you're just married to your job. Ooh. That is deep. I'm going to have to ruminate on that. That's like Osho level, like nice.
I would, take it very seriously. We know what we're doing over here.
I believe it. I just got read to filth.
There you go. Now, Tyler, where can people find you once again and get tickets, pre-order the book, all that good stuff? Yeah,
so my social media, Instagram, I'm most active on. That's Tyler Henry Medium. And then my website is on the link in my bio. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was so fun.
Good
luck.
You, Grace.
Of course. Good luck with everything. I will try to text you only every time you go to the desert. Don't worry.
I love it. I look forward to seeing you again. Have a good one. Of course.
You too. We'll see you guys next time on Not Too Deep. Goodbye.
Bye.
Too deep, too deep, too deep. Not Too Deep with Grace Helbig.
Not Too Deep is a production of Grace Helbig Incorporated. Producer Melissa D. Montz. Edited by Shireen Lani Yunus. Post-production sound by Chris Henry. And an extra special thanks to Flula for the theme music.